Hey, I wanted to do a little update on this little Voxy Lady project. No, we're not going to call it that. But before I get back to this amp design, I wanted to thank everyone for being so interested and so kind about the video yesterday and the amps that I have done in the past, my general approach to amps, and where I'm taking this. On that note, I find it very interesting that as I design an amp and it becomes, I tried this, I tried that, I tried this layout, try that layout. There's a certain logic to everything that reveals itself, a certain way things really do want to be, that I just find really interesting. When I find the most elegant form, the simplest form something can take, it becomes not only the most reliable, but it also becomes kind of lovely. I find that there's a symmetry to things that emerges, and it really interests me. If Leo Fender had any particular genius, it was this relentless practicality that also accommodated the curves of a Stratocaster or a jazz bass. So, an amazing man, and he wasn't a one-man show. And someday maybe we'll know what was Leo, what was George Fullerton, what was Bill Carson, et cetera, et cetera. But those guys who create things that we're still talking about and playing 40, 50 years down the line, 60 years, 75 years now. That's the goal. I don't want to sound like their stuff. I'm not trying to copy, but just that beauty of getting something just right. That's what I aim at. And I don't want to talk too much about philosophy on this, but it's encouraging when people are interested in these things that interest me, because most of my, real friends, the people I interact with every day, they kind of fall asleep when I talk about this stuff, or they roll their eyes. So I've learned to change the subject. But anyway, thank you. Thank you very much. So let's talk about this design and where things are at. I've got three major populations of the board here, and I'll talk about them. Let me stop moving the mouse. It's hard to see on the video. I'll use my finger or a pen. So on this version here, this is the version that the owner asked for, an EF86 channel. He actually just asked for the EF86 channel. That's all he wanted from that 62 AC15. But I would have this extra tube here. And there are so few components in the normal channel of a AC30, either the AC36 or the AC36 with top boost. We're just doing the normal channel here, that I decided to add that there. If he doesn't use it, that's fine, but I think he will, because the EF86 channel goes pretty quickly just to overdrive. The normal channel has a wider range of cleans, so I think that's very useful. So on this board, we've got the EF86 channel, we've got the normal channel, everything's JMI. Pretty much everything you see here is JMI, even though the caps are radials and the layout's different. This will actually sound better than the JMI, because it's not a bunch of stuff jammed together with a bunch of fragile solid core wires vibrating. I digress. But we have all these extra turrets here. Why do I have all these? Well, I've designed it this way because I may use the exact same board for all three major versions, EF86 and normal, normal and top boost, or EF86 and top boost. And then within that, there are three variations. No master volume, a very good quality post-phase inverter master volume, or variable voltage, which is pretty much the ideal way to control output level in one of these cathode biased amps. We'll get to that stuff in later videos. But it may turn out that I don't do this. I may have a fairly simple board for one version, a slightly more complex board for another version, and an even more complex version for the other board. I've got to look and see whether it's less expensive for me to say have 30 made like this with all these eyelets, or 10 simpler ones, 10 slightly more complicated, 10 more complicated still. I have a feeling the answer is going to be 30 of the same, but that's one of the things I have to look at. I use Doug Hoffman for my boards. He does a fantastic job. he's got a CNC machine set up to do this. He's got a turret press set up to do this. He can do in 5 minutes what would take me an hour. So I'm not going to do this by hand for the sake of my hands being the ones doing it, because I don't want to make the owners pay extra hours when they could pay Doug for minutes, essentially. But it is my design, and I think Doug and I have worked together very well over the years doing this kind of thing. So here's the EF86 channel and normal channel version. The next version will be the top boost and normal version. And as you can see, the eyelets, or rather the turret, stay the same, but the population changes. So here you have the first tube stage, which is shared by the the normal channel and the top boost channel. This shows caps and resistors to ground here for the input for the normal channel, the input for the top boost channel, and the wiper off the volume for the top boost channel, in case there's variable voltage. These would only be used if variable voltage is used in the amp, just to keep everything working right. So that's built in. Then we've got the tone stack populated here. After this stage here would be for the first gain stage and the cathode follower, driving the tone stack of the top boost circuit. And this is all JMI stuff again. So the EF86 normal channel is JMI. The top boost and normal version would be JMI. And here I have it shown where both channels would be mixed out of phase, which I've shown in many of the videos on AC30s and AC15s over the years, because that is the sound that the JMIs had, of the channels being mixed out of phase. This would give me the flexibility to do it out of phase or in phase, or I could install a switch to allow either. That would only really be that useful on the top boost normal version. It would not be very useful on the EF86 normal or the EF86 top boost version. But I do have that flexibility. Really fast, before I get into the next level of complexity, on this top boost, it would also have the mid boost, which I have shown in various amps. I think at its core, it would probably be either a push-pull pot for the bass control, or it might be a dedicated switch, depending on the panel real estate I have once I get the actual chassis and measure it. I could also put that on a foot switch on the back. Now, a similar circuit is done by companies like Dr. Z, just by having the foot switch connecting to the ground there, and that can work for very short signal paths, but for longer signal paths, you either introduce noise or you'll lose signal strength. It's much better to do that with a transistor. And so there might be a foot switched control for that as an option, for a nominal upgrade, maybe $50, I don't know. It will depend on, I'll get to that later. How good do you want this simple thing to be? I'm gonna start off really simple. I don't want to go, what about this, what about that? Anyway, the most complicated version of this is the EF86 top boost combination. And let me explain why. And some of you guys are gonna want to run to the hills when you hear this. Other guys are gonna say, oh really? That's cool. So for you guys who hear this, who are like, that's not vintage, that's crap, bear with me. I've worked on an awful lot of JMIs and an awful lot of 50s and 60s Fenders and an awful lot of 60s and 70s Marshalls. So I have a pretty good understanding of what vintage amps actually sound like. And I know how the amps actually work, the nitty gritty stuff, the boring math that no one wants to think about. So, not to sound egotistical, but when I say, trust me, this will sound great. Trust me, this will sound great. The issue is we've got three 3/4 inch openings for 9-pin tubes. Well, we have an EF86 here. That takes this whole thing up just for the EF86 channel. The two triodes here for the phase inverter. That leaves us with one tube location, and we need 3 triodes to do the top boost circuit in the Vox. There's the first stage, which is a gain stage, going to volume, which then goes to a second gain stage. another triode, so that's 2 triodes, which then goes to a third triode used as a cathode follower. Well, we have 1, we have 2. Where's our third gain stage? I could try to fit another tube in here. Besides the expensive drilling, it'd be really close to these. I could maybe put a tube here. No, you don't want that, especially with a combo. There's a speaker right there. I could cut a big hole out here, and there's no need for any of that. Tubes are very, very good for certain things, and other things they do fine. What they do really well is a gain stage in an audio part. We like the sound of amplification through tube triodes and pentodes. Well, let's ignore the EF86 here. But what happens on the cathode follower of this is it's nominally not a gain stage. It's nominally unity gain. What it is doing is driving a load very efficiently. And the tube does a pretty good job of that. But what will also do that same job at unity gain of driving the tone stack load is a high voltage MOSFET. So if I have tube for audio gain, MOSFET for unity gain, driver of the tone stack, that lets us get the JMI top boost circuit without adding extra tubes in a form that will sound identical to the old amps without jacking the price of this thing up. It is very simple. It is reliable. It runs at high voltage. It does not have a high heat. The final layout with this might change a little bit, but this circuit allows me to do a really neat trick in this of getting the authentic thing. Some AC30 copies, or they call themselves copies, when faced with the same dilemma, will drive the tone stack from the plate of the second triode, which is how Fenders do it. And that can work. That does not sound or feel like an AC30 when you have a plate-driven tone stack. But the cathode follower-driven tone stack has the right sound, and that doesn't really matter if it's a triode driving that cathode follower tone stack or a very high-quality MOSFET. Now, in the future, I might actually do an amp where I'm using a different kind of high voltage MOSFET to replace the EF86 entirely, because EF86s are getting harder and harder to find which are usable, are quiet, are reliable, are not microphonic as can be. And I will talk about that more in detail later, because I don't want someone to buy one of these with the EF86 channel unless they know that they may have to go through a lot of relatively expensive RFT or Telefunken EF86s until they find a keeper. And there's, in 20 years from now, they may not be available. I've looked at 5189s and a few other tube types, which are also pentodes, which can kind of do the same thing. But there is a MOSFET I'm playing around with, which could theoretically replace that. And a lot of people are happy with it. I will announce that bridge when I've jumped off it. We'll put it that way. I'm not going to scare everyone off by saying I'm going to do a solid state front end here, but I'm going to design that, and I think I'm going to build one and let you guys hear it and tell me what you think. But as far as this, where it's not a gain stage, it's just driving a current load, trust me, this will sound great. But again, these are turrets, which are these turrets here would only be used for this version, where you have the EF86 here, because that takes up the whole tube. For the normal top boost version, you have this triode for the normal channel, this triode, and this triode for top boost. Bob's your uncle, vintage, no problem. There were some other things I was going to talk about in this video, like the difference between my tight switch on the normal channel, also on the EF86 channel, versus the 6-position switch that Matchless did, that 65 amps did. I'll talk about that in a later video because I need to start dinner. But I'll put it this way, I've played a lot of those, I've had a lot of those come in. Of those 6 positions, maybe 2 are really useful, the others are very similar to each other, and I find that players get option paralysis. So as simple as I can make this thing, the better. But I got to stop here because I got to make dinner. It is Saturday night. Hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.